Hey, what's up, guys? I'm John Borba. I'm here with Brandon Hunt.
Hey.
And we are here to talk about Walking Dead Episode 4 called Some Guy.
Is it called Some Guy?
It's called Some Guy. The point of the name is obviously that Ezekiel is just some dude and he tricked all these people into believing that he was this grandiose king. Which I feel like is kind of what Walking Dead is trying to do with its viewers right now. But for the first time in a couple episodes, I'm a big fan of Walking Dead, but I feel like there's been not real consequences, not real tension. Everything feels kind of just going through the motions, which Walking Dead has had a problem with pacing in the past. So it was nice to see real potential consequences. Like, these characters are not ones that you know are going to stick around long term.
Right.
And I think that it was nice to feel like you might lose somebody that you actually really care about.
I appreciated this episode just because it dragged down Ezekiel to a peg that we haven't seen him at before. We kind of knew he was sort of at this place, in the sense that, you know, he knows, and maybe Carol and some other people know. Like, people probably know, but he knows that he's not like the grandiose man that he built himself up as, or at least he feels like that now after this episode, when it's literally him and two other people that come back from the battle.
The weird thing about this is the comic does it in a way where it feels like there's a much bigger slice or divide between who Ezekiel is pretending to be and who he actually is. And this, when he explains that he was a zookeeper and how he met Shiva and everything in the show, it feels like he's still wearing that shell of the character that he was, where in the comics, he loses his grandiose voice and he's like, dude, I used to just be the zookeeper. I found this tiger, but the point is that people needed someone to lead them, and I stepped up and was that guy.
Right.
And you don't get that as much in this episode, and I did feel like I kind of missed that.
Well, in the comic, of course, he's with Michonne for a time, and when you get a relationship, you know, the walls come down, and they get to kind of view inside like the real person. And we got that with the comic, but we didn't necessarily get that with the show. There was some kind of back and forth with him and Carol, but we didn't really get to explore to the full extent that we probably did in the comics.
I think the show did that in order to set up Ezekiel having that moment where he really just has his mask torn off by just being brought low.
Right.
So they just decided to do it in a different way in the show. And while I liked it, I felt like him choosing to do it and trusting someone else in the comics felt like a more personal thing.
Sure.
But I do think that there are a lot of interesting ways because of this that the show could go from here.
Yeah, I liked the episode. I probably didn't hate the episodes. I wouldn't call it hate, but you didn't like the episodes as much as I did. I see it as more building tension because, you know, we had a lot of that tension leading up to the arrival of Negan, and we have a lot of tension leading up to this supposed battle with Negan that we think is going to happen. And the event that we also think is going to happen, which is the time jump that happens in the comics. And I think that this is more build up to that event, and we're sort of breaking down characters at this point in the season where, you know, this was episode 4. And, you know, we still have 4 more to go until the mid-season finale. So there's some time to kind of explore other characters, agendas, and whatnot. So we're at the midpoint until the midpoint. And I think hopefully...
The
quarter point. And I think hopefully building up to the mid-season finale, episode 5, is where things are going to start to ramp up a little bit, as they kind of were in this episode. But possibly crossing fingers that, you know, the tension's going to keep building, the fire's going to keep burning, and we're, you know, maybe we're at the lowest point in this half of the season, and we're kind of coming up on, you know, an upper. But we'll see. It's The Walking Dead, so, you know, it's hard for people not to die in every episode.
I feel like with the 3rd episode, it was kind of like the lull for me. It was leaning too hard into characters that Walking Dead just assumed that we cared about. You know, obviously I'm a lot more invested in the leader of a community like Ezekiel than I am in Aaron's boyfriend, who I had to look up what his name was after he got turned into a walker because I just was not invested in him. He was not developed. He was just put out there as an emotional moment for Aaron, who's a character that they also have not put in the spotlight.
I mean, I would argue that these little things are more just little digs at the core group that we're following to bring them down more morally and emotionally to the point where maybe this is all leading up to a collective push to be more aggressive and more unforgiving in the things that they have to do coming up. So while it might not be totally fulfilling as a viewer, maybe in the long run, I would think that all of these things building up, these little events building up, could potentially be the big pot that they're about to spill out.
I do feel like we could be on an upswing. I'm very excited to see what happens with the rest of the season now that we are turning in our focus to more important and imperative characters to the story. So let us know what you think about the episode. Comment, we'll check it out. And for everything Walking Dead, stick with IGN.
Shiva.